So again, I want to welcome you officially. And today's webinar, as I said, is sponsored by the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training, or as just a lot of people call us, the partnership. And if you're wondering what is a partnership, what do you guys do? If you're not familiar with us, we're an organization that administers education and training programs, and we do that for CSEA represented employees, and we do use labor management cooperation to work on that. It is funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSEA. Now, we offer classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and a whole lot of other types of education and training programs, including things like the webinar you're in today. Basically, the partnership is a joint labor management organization, and our mission is to promote your career mobility, to make your job easier to do, to support your safety in the workplace, and also help with labor management relations. You can learn more about us on our website, which you can see on the screen, or you're welcome to call us. There's our phone number, and don't worry, I'll provide our contact information again at the end of the webinar. So now that you know a bit more of the partnership, I'm going to turn this over to Michael Barber, and he's going to tell you about Microsoft Teams Basics.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. My name, as Eileen mentioned, is Michael Barber. I am a training and development specialist for Microknowledge here in Albany, and I've been working for them for a couple of years now. Prior to that, I was a high school social studies and English teacher and assistant principal, so my background comes from the education sector. And training teams is, hopefully, this will be a fun experience for all of us, and we'll get some new stuff out of it. But please, by all means, if you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to ask. All right, but before we get started, I want to ask you a question. So have you used Microsoft Teams before?
Well, if you have, would you click on that raise hand button? So use that to let us know if you've used Teams at all. Well, you know what? It seems like 10 or 11 folks have, which is out there every day, Eric says. Okay, and you can put your hand back down. And definitely Nicole says yes. And by the way, if you are having a little trouble finding the raise hand on a mobile device, you're most welcome to type it in chat. So, okay, quite a lot of people there, Michael.
Yeah, and we have a good mix, though. It looks like there's a number of us that have used Teams, and there's a few that didn't put hands up. So I think we have a good mix. But no matter what level experience you have with the program, I'm sure there's going to be something in today's webinar for everyone.
I expect so.
All right, so what are we going to cover today? Let's look at our objectives. And by the end of this webinar, you should be able to describe the basic features of Teams, illustrate how to use chat messages and channel postings, identify how to schedule and participate in a meeting, and finally recognize the benefits of collaborating on files and documents. Now, along the way, I'll explain each function and show you where to find the function in Teams. We'll be using screenshots, and we'll give you a couple best practices to help you while you're using it. I do want to note that because this is a basic level course, we won't be covering all of the features today. Instead, we'll be focusing on what you need to know to get started. Even still, there's a lot to cover. So we've also provided you with some handouts to help you remember those key points. So if you're a note taker, don't worry about writing everything down.
Hey, that's a good point. You know, folks, there are some great handouts, and if you haven't printed them yet, that's fine. You can always print them after the webinar. Now, you would have gotten an email from the partnership, probably from Jean Griebert at the partnership, about 2 weeks ago, and that was the email that said you were accepted into the class, not the one with the link to join this class. And that should have had a couple of attachments, which were your handouts. So you may want to try and find them later if you need them.
Excellent. Thank you, Eileen. All right, so our roadmap. We'll be looking at our objectives as a roadmap as we go through the webinar today. And first up, let's talk about the basics of Teams. What is it? What are the basic features, and how do you get around? So what is Teams? For those of you that have used it before, how would you describe it to someone who has no experience with it?
Well, what we want you to do is type in the chat box, especially for those of you who've used Teams. Tell us, you know, kind of in a nutshell, a brief description of how you would tell someone else what's Teams. In chat, please. collaboration platform, online chatting, kind of like instant messenger, this, like we're doing here today, online chat, meetings, okay, interviews. Oh, you mean like the video portion, I'm assuming, in the chat. Collaborate with various teams in the agency, a quick way to communicate. Well, how'd they do, Michael?
These are excellent, excellent responses, and they're all spot on. Everything that I said, I was like, yep. Look at that, perfect. So we love your responses. Keep them coming. So we absolutely, it makes the experience so much better for Eileen and myself. So thank you very much for those. Absolutely.
Yeah, we love it when you collaborate.
Sure do. Now, for those of you that are new to Microsoft Teams, you can think of it as a collaboration software. That's the easiest way. It allows you to easily communicate and work with teammates to increase efficiency and improve productivity. You can use it to send instant messages, create meetings, and share files all in one spot. Unlike email and Outlook, Teams creates a single space where you can work with your teammates. You can use Teams no matter what size or purpose of your team. You can use it to coordinate daily tasks with coworkers or tackle special projects. Like, for example, the Department of Health used Microsoft Teams to establish channels for employees and volunteers so that they could share information and report data regarding pandemic-related projects, right, such as vaccine numbers from their various pods.
What a great idea, too.
Now that you know what Teams is, how do we get around? Let's take a brief tour of the software.
Okay, so we'll do a whirlwind tour of what Teams looks like.
You got it. Absolutely. Now, this is the most important section for you, folks. This is where everything happens on the left navigation menu. You'll get around Teams by using this navigation menu on the left side of the screen. So there's a few buttons, little icons with descriptions underneath it. But let's go right down through this list together.
I didn't understand that.
Okay. Should we go back? Activity.
Weird. Okay.
No worries. Activity, at the top of the menu, you'll see an activity button, and this will show you your mentions, replies to your message, and other notifications. But if you stay on top of your notifications, you won't see much happening here. But if you step away for an hour or two and your team is very active, there might be like a little red number symbol saying that you've had 4 or 5 different things that you need to attend to. This way, you can go right to it and bounce around to all of the things you need to quickly without having to search. It'll just tell you what's important for you. So you can also click the little gear button that you see over to the right there, and that'll let you adjust your notification settings. Very important to change those notification settings. All right, now the chat button will let you take you through all of your chats, and we'll talk more about how to use the chat feature in a couple minutes. But for now, just know that they're here, and you can return to a previous chat or start a new one by clicking on the little button highlighted in the upper right. All right. The Teams button will take you to all your teams, and here you'll see your teams with all of their accompanying channels listed below. And we're going to talk more about teams and channels later on. Before we do, I want to make sure we all understand what teams are. In Microsoft Teams, a team is a collection of people, tools, and content. Let me say that again. It's the who. It's a collection of people, tools, and content that work together on a project or recurring task. So let's just pause for a moment and ask, are you currently on a team in Microsoft Teams?
Well, and you may not know, but if you do, would you tell us in chat? Now, keep in mind that you still would be able to use things like chat, even if you weren't on a formal team. But I'm seeing a handful of people say, yes, they're actually on a team. No, I'm not on a formal team. So what do you think, Mike?
It looks like not many of us. I personally, and some of us are, I personally am on 2 different teams on 2 different machines at the same time, right? So I log in 2 different places, right? My microknowledge account and then a Department of Health account. And it really, really, really makes for a ease of use, folks. It's not hard. I can interact with either one of them with my phones. It sounds like it's a lot, but it really brings everybody closer together. It's a great solution.
And you keep Teams open all the time on, well, I guess those two computers?
Absolutely. All day long when I open up my machine, I log in both machines. I say hello to that team. I say hello to this team, and then we communicate throughout the entire day back and forth as necessary. And it is just wonderful. It is just a great platform for interactivity. We don't have to just text. We can talk. We can, share screens with each other. We can share files. At any point in time, it's literally there. If we need something, I can ask the entire team. I have 27 other people I can ask questions of and get a response right away. It's fantastic.
All right. Well, that's why we're here, right?
That's why we're here, yes. So you can see my enthusiasm, folks, because I definitely love the software. And let's get right back into this. All right, because if you're not sure about Teams, you can go there by clicking on that Teams button on your navigation. And if you see something listed there that looks like the sample that we see on the screen with text and then more text below it like that, then it means you are part of a team. And if you already have a team set up at your organization, then you can jump in and get started. If you're not part of a team right now, don't worry. Most of what we'll discuss can also be done in the chat functions, right? But if you do want to create a team, you will need to submit a ticket to your information technology services and also likely talk with your supervisor.
That's right. So it needs a ticket to create a team.
Now, the calendar button will take you directly to your calendar, and this syncs with Outlook, so they should look the same. You can schedule your meetings from this page or choose to meet now, which will essentially skip the scheduling part and let you go in to an immediate meeting. When you start that meeting, you can then grab the link, the join link, drop it into your Outlook, and send it to someone outside of the organization. That's the secret. So once you meet now in your calendar, jump right into a live meeting. And we'll see some more of those in a little bit, but that is the way to kind of work around the limitations. You can still meet with them. You just can't necessarily have the chats and conversations, as part of a channel. So there's ways to work with Teams. It's really, really fun. All right. Calls. Now the calls button will take you to a page where you can call someone through Teams, or so you can see your call history. And just so you know, if someone calls you in Teams, you will hear a ringtone if your volume is on, right? Make sure the volume's on. And you'll also receive a pop-up notification where you can answer the call. So it will give you a little indicator saying that you're receiving a call, and go ahead and click on it to answer it. The File button will take you first to your recent files, which includes every file that you've recently viewed or edited. The Microsoft Team view will then show you all documents created or edited in channels in your entire team list. So downloads show all the files you've downloaded. Right? Cloud storage shows the cloud storage devices that are connected to Teams. So you can see different views of different file availability, but essentially they're all in the same location right here in Teams, accessible by anyone with permissions.
So you can all work on files, yeah, great.
Exactly. So it's basically like taking your file cabinet and making it all virtual. So everything is cloud-based, very easy. You could be working on the beach and still pulling up the files that you need.
Don't encourage us, Michael.
Oh, I want to encourage you. Work from the beach. Work from the park. That's what Teams let you do, right? As long as your office allows that sort of thing, right?
That's right.
Don't break the rules for Michael Barber.
Right? That's right. But also, folks, keep in mind, we're going to go over these things in more detail in a few minutes.
We will. All right, the remaining buttons in that navigation menu are apps, where you can see if there are many more apps you can link to in Teams, and help, which you can use to browse popular help topics and get to the videos. Now, apps are more advanced, and we won't be covering those in this class, but I encourage you, make use of the help feature, as there are many helpful step-by-step instructions and videos to walk you through what we'll talk about today. And we'll even include a link to some of these videos in your handout. So now that we've talked about the navigation menu, let's look at the right side of your Teams window. There in the upper right corner, you'll find two important buttons, Settings and More and Profile. Now, when you click on the three dots in the upper right corner, you'll open a drop-down menu. From here, you can click Settings to adjust many different settings, including how you want your Teams to look, the default language, notification settings, audio and video devices, just to name a few. You can also set Teams to start automatically and put up an out-of-office message through this menu as well. So finally, you can use this menu to zoom in and zoom out to check on the keyboard shortcut and check out the keyboard shortcuts that will work for Teams as well. So lots in this section, a lot of information in the upper right corner. Now, your profile picture as well, and you can see here we've got that nice dog with a scarf.
I know, that's Jess's dog.
Dressed for the weather, for snow, right? So the profile picture also has a drop-down menu, and you can click your profile picture to choose a new image, like the nice one we have here of Jess's dog. You could set your status, or you can set a status message. All right, so are there any questions about how to navigate Teams before we move on?
So right now we're just saying, any questions about that navigation panel, the kind of the purpose of those buttons? If you do, you can type it in chat or you can click on the raise hand, whatever you prefer. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions right now. All right, Eric, I think it is straightforward, but so we'll move on.
Excellent. All right, so now that we're familiar with the basic features of Teams, let's talk about those chat messages and channel conversations. Now, first off, when should we use chat, right? Chat in Teams is similar to any other instant messaging service you may have used, including Skype for Business or social media chat forums like Facebook Messenger. Users can format text, send images, emojis, even stickers. You can also share files right in the chat messages. We're going to get to more of that later. And chats can be between a one-to-one situation with you and one other person or between a group of people. Now, you can use chats to talk with your colleagues or coworkers outside the context of a team or special project. Chat messages are great for quick conversations or questions that would otherwise clog up your inbox. So think of the chat kind of like the over-the-cubicle talk or the quick conversation kind of thing. That's what we want to get with a chat. It's kind of, it's still formal because you're still at work, right? But it's more of an informal conversational sort of thing.
Got it.
All right, so let's give you a chance to test your knowledge here now that we've taken you on a tour of Teams. On the screen is a sample of the chat screen. And where would you click to start a new chat? Eileen is going to explain to us how we can use the arrow tool to do this.
Okay, so at the top of your screen, you've got kind of a tiny little menu. It's got an arrow, capital T, the slash. And what we want you to do is to click on the arrow to select that tool, then take your mouse and click where you think you should click to start a new chat, okay? So, whoa, okay, it's okay if you're all over each other, but you know, I'm starting to see some arrows pile up in one certain place, Michael, or did they do good?
It's like watching Hawkeye shoot arrows. They're just shooting right through each other. One right to the bullseye, bullseye, bullseye.
It's a beautiful thing. Yes, you guys.
Spot on, folks. You got it exactly right.
Got it, yeah. And if you don't use it, then you just found it from where the other guys are pointing.
All right, folks, so that's right. To start a new chat with someone, you click on the new chat box. A little button that looks like a box with a pen in it. Now, as a reminder, to get to the screen, you would click on the chat in the navigation menu on the left side of your Teams window. You can then select the previous chat and continue the conversation or click that new chat button to start a new one. Now, once you've opened a new chat window, you can type the recipient's name in the to line and select their name from a drop-down of suggestions. You could add multiple recipients this way and start a group chat. Folks, it'll work just like adding multiple recipients to your Outlook. You'll type them in, you can select them, select the next one, select the next one, select the next one.
Makes sense.
So using the toolbar on the bottom of the page, you can see that you can select message options, right? And this includes formatting, delivery options, where you can mark your messages as standard, important, or urgent. And if you send them as urgent, be mindful, be careful. It will send a notification for them every 2 minutes for 20 minutes straight. It will notify them. Ping, 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 every 2 minutes.
You really want to make sure it's urgent then, right? Before you
if it's that urgent, right, Eileen, wouldn't we just pick up the phone, right, and give that person a call? Or call them directly through Teams if you can. But if you can't, There it is. So you have options here. So you're starting to see a little bit more of the platform of the work that you can do. You can also attach. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also suppose, let's say I was on the phone and you're trying to get in touch with me, that might give me a visual. So that's one thought.
Exactly. I've only seen it used once with microknowledge, and that was when someone had an issue with one of our training situations, and one of our head trainers was in a training at the time, and we had to break it out because it was a remote situation. But it's very fast. Once you get that first notification, bing, you won't wait 20 minutes. If you're free, you will definitely respond.
I see what you're saying.
So let's take a look back in those conversations. We got, in addition to those delivery options, you can put, whoops, we can go a little far, too far. You can go in and put in attachments, emojis, stickers. You can schedule a meeting right here from this chat page, right? And when you're ready, this is the most important part. Folks, you have to get this, and this is why we had to go back. When you're ready to send your message, always click that send button. It looks like a little paper airplane flying off to the right. I have come back to messages that I personally have forgotten to send because I have not clicked that. And it is embarrassing to train the software and have that little tiny thing catch me up. So please, my pain, your gain.
learn from that, right.
That's right. That's right. All right, so now I have a question for you before we move on. Do you think that you can use chat to talk with someone outside of the agency, outside of your agency?
Yeah, just curious, what do you guys think? Can you use chat to go to someone outside your agency? And I'm seeing some yeses. I'm seeing some no's. So that's very interesting. Let's see. And yeah, a couple of people said, I don't know. I'm not sure. You tell me.
So unfortunately, the answer to this question is, it depends, right? It depends on whether you or the other agency are in the same ITS group. But unfortunately, in most cases, however, the answer is going to be no. And this might surprise you, but Teams is best used with coworkers and teammates that are work together frequently. If you need to contact someone outside of your agency, you can find Teams to do it. You can always use your email, right? And if you're not sure, you can always try searching for that person by typing their name in the to line in the chat. If their contact information doesn't come up, then it means you can't reach them in Teams. This is for security. If you think about like your conference room in a physical location, and you had a meeting in there, and you've got all kinds of important files, would you want some stranger from the street walking in? Would you want somebody else having access to your secure team environment with all your files and all your chats and communications?
Well, that does make sense, and that explains why some of you said yes and some said no. It probably depends on who you were trying to contact and if they were in the same IT group as IT puts them together.
Exactly.
So Eric says, I prefer it for interviews, but if the candidate is outside my agency, which is like SCD, it'll not work, and then you have to go to Zoom or some other tool, probably like WebEx or things like that. So, yep, it depends.
Exactly, it depends. All right, so now that we know how to use the chat feature, let's look at some of the best practices for using chat in Teams. First thing, check the status. Before you send someone a message, check their status to see if they're available, and have realistic expectations for their response time. We can't always get an immediate response from everyone. Like the people who send text messages and stare at their phone waiting for the other person to reply. You can't always function like that. It's a little bit of, possessive of other people's time and their energy and their efforts. We don't know what they're doing, and this is work. So give a little bit of space, realistic amounts of time. Okay? Next, and this one I absolutely can stand by, keep it short. Right? Keep your messages short. No one wants to read a lengthy message. No one wants to read prose in their text or their chat, right? You want to get to the point so you don't miss the point if it's too long. Next, set those delivery options and use the standard often. Important will flag something that is important, and use urgent only if it really, really is urgent. I have seen an organization where they actually were learning this and they were, kind of messing around, and because they use that so much now, they've cried wolf. It means nothing to them. It's like they see it and they just completely ignore it. And I'm like, why are you doing that? It happens all the time. So
And
be
the
mindful
urgent
of those.
thing is where it gives you a notice every 2 minutes?
Yes, yes, but if you
Okay.
turn off those notifications, like my phone and my computer, I've turned them off so that they'll flash, but they won't they won't ring, they
Okay.
won't give the buzz. So they just kind of ignore the thing flapping, and it misses some of the point. It's like you can
Yeah.
escalate your conversation. So kind of be very, very careful with that. Next, same as well, another place to be really careful with, don't overuse the fun stuff, right? The emojis, the reactions, and stickers are a fun aspect of Teams, but don't overuse them, right? If you're spending a lot of time posting emojis and reactions to every statement, how much work are you doing, right? It sends kind of a weird message. So you want to kind of use them to pump up morale every now and again or to interact, but don't spend all day long just sending, like GIFs and memes back and forth, because then it will send that message that it's not as professional as it could be. But that is, again, that might be what your organization needs for that particular activity or that time, so go for it. It can be what you want it to be. These are not rules, they're just guidelines. All right, best practices. And number 5, this one without question, you have to stand on this one, and you have to, we all have to own this as professionals. Be professional. The team content can be audited by IT administrators. Just like any other information on our work computers, be professional. Even if you delete something, it does not delete. It can be brought back immediately. If it's not something you can say in your cubicle or at the water cooler or in the office, don't post it. It's not appropriate for work. So just be mindful. Best practices, folks, just to make sure that we're doing things the right way. Now, the next feature I would like to discuss is channels. Channel postings are like chats, except they exist within a team. And a channel is a dedicated section of a team to keep conversations organized by specific topics, projects, or tasks, whatever works for your team. So another way to think of channels is this is where the team work happens, right? So you go the where. The where is the key piece. Remember, the team is the who, the channel is the where.
Okay, that makes sense.
Easiest way to kind of understand it, right? Now, you should go to your team channel when you're working on a relevant project or task that involves all of the team members in that particular channel. Right? So it's not communicating with one-to-one, it's everyone on that channel, everyone in that team. So when you've decided you want to use the channel, you have 2 options. You can, 1, reply to an existing channel conversation, or 2, start a new one. Right? The decision here is simple. So is what you're posting relevant to a previous conversation that was already started, or is it something new? All right, so let's give you a chance to test your knowledge a little bit. On the screen is a sample of a channel in Teams. Now, where would you click to respond to the existing conversation? And Eileen can show us once again, just to show that a little bit about the arrow tool, just to remind you.
All right, just
wow,
to remind you.
Goodness, look at that.
Oh, you guys are good. But yes, of course, it's up in that toolbar. If you are on a mobile device, you can't do that. So you would tell us in chat where, the best you can. But hey, I'm seeing a bunch of arrows in one spot. So that makes sense, right? This is to reply or to respond. So, yep, good job.
Beautiful. All right, folks, that's exactly correct. To reply to an existing conversation or posting in the channel, you simply click reply underneath it. Type your response, and do not forget to click that send button, right, the one that looks like the little paper airplane. Right, you can see if you look right here, just real quick, I'll push that in there. Notice if you want to start a new conversation, you would simply click on that button right there and get a new one going for yourself as well. Oh, that's our next one. We've got it already highlighted. Look, next conversation. It's
there
right
it
there.
is.
I got a little ahead of myself because I was excited for you.
It is exciting, I got to admit.
All right, this is a fun webinar. Having a good time. All right, so let's look at some of the best practices for using channels in Teams. Right? Now we're talking about channels. This is informal communication with chat. Channels are a little bit more formal because everyone on that team is going to be involved in these conversations. So let's look at the best practices. Number 1, make sure it's relevant. Make sure you're in the right place and that the post is relevant to the channel. Right? If this is not something that's part of the marketing team, should it be posted in the marketing team's channel? No. Right? Post it where it needs to be, over in the advertising section or sales perhaps. Keep it short. Again, Keep your messages short. This applies across the board to messages in Teams. You want them to be maybe a sentence or more. If it starts getting into a paragraph, you're typing too much, right?
Yeah.
Make it an email. If it's a paragraph, it should be an email. This should be a quick kind of, hey, what's going on over the cubicle kind of conversation, or hey, what's going on as you walk past. Something quick, right? Again, don't overuse the fun stuff. Emojis, reacts, and stickers, they're fun, but they can definitely take you into dangerous waters when it comes to work. So be mindful of those. Use the @ symbol for mentions. When you put an @ symbol for mentions, you can put in and get a specific team member's name, get their attention. So it'll flag, if you say @Michael Barber, it'll pop up for me in red, and it'll say Michael Barber, this is the message that you just received, and it lets me know. There's an additional indicator for me to be mindful. So that means that on my activity, remember the left navigation, on my activity now, I'll have an additional notification saying that someone mentioned me with the @mention. So it kind of links back and helps you be successful. Lastly, and most important for our channel best practices, always be professional. The team's content can be audited by IT administrators, and nothing will be deleted. It is all there, even if you remove it. So think twice before you click send, and be professional at all times.
So, Michael, just for my own sake to understand, a chat, you would specify who it was going to, and that could be a team member or not. But for channel, it automatically goes to everyone on the team. Is that right?
Correct. So if you think of like my organization, right, I work with my office manager, Tammy, and she and I chat in Teams every day, all the time. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What's going on? How is my schedule? That's her and I talking directly. When we communicate in our channel formally, that's us talking to everyone in the entire organization. So the language is a little bit different. We're a little bit more formal with how we communicate. We're very to the point because we're talking to everyone. Think about it, if we're just the two of us are talking when we come into the office at the first part of the morning, hey, Tammy, how are you? And hey, Michael, what's going on? Or when we're all sitting together in the office with the entire team in the office room discussing what, our agenda, what have you. Different kind of way of operating, right? Chat, more informal. Channel, more formal.
Got it. So, yeah, thanks.
No worries. So do we have, and this is a perfect time, if anyone else has any questions about those chat or channels, right?
So if you have a question like I did, would you type it in chat or raise your hand if you prefer? Let us know if you have a question. I don't see anything, but don't worry, folks. You can always ask anywhere along the line if you're like, oh, yeah, something came up for me. So don't say anything yet, but we'll move on.
All right, and remember, we do love your questions. The more you participate, the more fun this is for myself and for Eileen. I know I'm speaking for Eileen, but I know it's more fun when folks are interacting with us.
And Jacqueline did put in a question. She said, is a group chat like speaking in a channel? What would you say to that?
No, it's just like you're standing around the water cooler. Right? It's still that informal conversation that will still have all the same kind of conditions and form, but it's not a formal communication. When you're speaking in a channel, it's a great way to sort of use it to disseminate tasks, to check up on status and progress, and think of it more along the lines of not necessarily supervisory, but definitely more formal in the communication process because it goes to everyone all at once. So it doesn't communicate like a chat would. Like a chat is literally we're talking to each other, where in the channel, at least in my organization, we tend to be a little bit more, hello, good afternoon, how are you doing, Mr. Barber, that kind of thing. We're a little bit more on point when we communicate there because we know everybody's looking at it. And you can, you have certain interactions and certain things that make sense with certain people, certain metaphors that work well. And with other people, like, talking about heavy metal works really well with my office manager because we're both metalheads, but not everyone on the team gets the references to things like that. So we have to be really more kind of neutral, if that makes more sense.
Okay, so maybe, Jacqueline says yes, thanks, that does help. So maybe, like you said, chat's the water cooler, channel is the all-staff meeting or something like that.
Well, if you think about it like this, even the names are different. The chat is referred to as a chat. In a channel, it's referred to as a conversation, right? So it's even more official with the terminology. Now, think about that, though, because a conversation in channel can start and then stop, and then you can start a new one and stop it. In a chat, it's still the same continuous conversation. It's one big, long chat that you've had, and you just keep adding to the same one, right? So it's your relationship connection with that person, if that makes sense.
And I think that is kind of a confusing idea, so thanks for helping us with that, Michael.
No worries. If you have any other questions, folks, please don't hesitate to ask us about it. All right, so now this is a hotly debated topic, right? The saying in the office world is, this meeting could have been an email. And so if we adapt that for the Teams lingo, when do you think it's appropriate to have a meeting over a chat message or a channel conversation?
All right, we're interested in your thoughts here. Type it in chat. What's your feeling? When do you think it's a good idea to go to an actual meeting versus just a chat or channel conversation? What do you think, folks? Type it in chat. When there's a group project going on, Eric says. Anybody else have any thoughts when a meeting would work best? Oh, training. Let's say you were going to do some training for your team members. Or if it's meetings would be for extended conversations and interactions. Yeah, and if it's easier, you can tell us, well, here's when you'd use chat or whatever. When you have to share important communications, yeah. When to contact and share work projects, different units coming together. Okay, sure. It makes sense to me. Does that make sense to you, Michael?
It does, and these are all fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing. You're all spot on. Right? There's no right or wrong answer here, as everybody's projects and teams working style vary. Right? There's no perfect solution. There is, however, one small sort of rule that you can use. If you find yourself typing an awful lot back and forth, maybe you just want to have a conversation, right? Right, because I'm not a great typer, so I tend to have a lot of typos and a lot of errors, and I'm a slow typer. So that, for me, is a sure sign. Hey, can't we just make a phone call? And we use Teams right away for that.
Okay, yeah. You're going back and forth a lot. Let's just jump into a meeting.
Right, exactly. And that could be a phone call, an audio meeting, so you don't have to have the video on, and you just talk. And that way it's just a little faster, a little more efficient. Right? Yeah. And if you have a lot of things to discuss, usually a meeting is a good way to go. But again, everybody works differently, and you never really know unless you've communicated where the other person is. So if they can't meet and talk with you right now, you have that to think about as well. All right, but let's talk about scheduling meetings here at this point. Let me give you a chance to test your knowledge once again. On the screen, we see a sample of a calendar in Teams. Where would you click if you wanted to schedule a meeting?
So we're going to use that arrow key again at the top.
Oh, look how fast.
Left. Yeah, okay. So where would you go to schedule? I'm seeing a bunch of arrows. Are they in the right spot?
They are exactly in the right spot.
Hey, you know, if I can pause that for a moment, Teresa has a question. She says, can you print your conversations from the team chat? Or I guess
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes you can. Sometimes you absolutely can't. Now, they'll always be there, but printing is the hard part, right? It's to get them in that print. If you are in, and we'll get to this when we look at meetings, just a little bit. We don't dive too deep, but you can set your meetings to record and have closed captioning, and then you can get a transcript of some of your meetings. And I know my wife does this with some of the work that she does. So there are definitely ways you can get printed reports from conversations, but usually they remain just in Teams. They cannot be erased, and you just kind of go back to it as a repository.
Okay. All right. All right. And closed captioning is nice for people who maybe have some hearing problems. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference for accessibility. All right, so when we click on that scheduling Meet Now or the schedule now, we're going to get this scheduling assistant that pops up here. And you'll have to enter in some information like a title, the attendees, the date and time, and just like Access or Outlook, you'll have access to this scheduling assistant to find the best time for all your attendees. Now, you can add your agenda in here and the details, and when you're done, you have to click that send. This will send an invitation out to everybody that you've offered the meeting to.
Okay.
On the flip side of it, in your calendar, you would receive the invite right there, and you'll see it in your calendar. And when it's time to join, you simply would go to the calendar in Teams, click on the invitation, a little window will pop up, and you can click join. Right? If you're the meeting organizer, it might also give you the option to edit. So let's pause for a moment here. How many of you have ever been in a Teams meeting before?
And Letitia will come back to your question in a moment, but for now, what we're asking is, have any of you been in a Teams meeting before? Would you click on, oh, actually, you know what? Why don't we use the yes or no? So the green check, if you can access it, is yes. Red X, no. And you're welcome to type in chat if you're having trouble finding that on your cell phone. I guess it's about half and half.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
All right. So let me come back to the question that we have. Letitia said, when would you schedule a Teams meeting versus a WebEx meeting? Now, Letitia, as you know, we have, as New York State employees, have access to both tools. But do you have any thoughts on that, Michael?
I absolutely do. That is a spot-on question. Use Teams whenever you need to meet with people within your organization. Use WebEx when you have to meet with people outside of your organization. It'll just make for a much easier experience to invite them, to get them in, to get them interacting with you. So WebEx outside, Teams internal.
Now, that's a good point.
That's just a good rule of thumb.
Like we're using WebEx today, because remember that issue where sometimes you can contact people from other agencies and sometimes you can't? Well, with WebEx, you just put in their email address, and then we can all be together from all these different agencies and SUNY campuses across the street. Across the state. All right, so thanks about that.
Great question. Excellent. So once we enter that meeting, you're going to be given several different options. And these options will allow you to control your hardware, such as your webcam and your audio devices. Now, the statewide version of Teams will limit your audio options for joining meetings. So you can only join using computer audio or devices attached to your computer. You can see that the phone option is grayed out here.
Mm.
Yeah, in your handouts, we provided you with information on a workaround where you can download Teams on your smartphone and use that for audio if you're having trouble with the computer or if you don't have the right setup. Now, also keep in mind, if you're working remotely and accessing your work machine virtually, you won't be able to connect to the audio through your virtual work machine. Instead, you'll have to have Teams installed on the computer in your home or on the mobile device. Now, lastly, make sure you know that all these settings are okay before you click Join Now. Make sure you don't unknowingly join with the camera on or off or the wrong audio device selected. Always good to kind of double check this before you start.
You know, actually, before we go on to this topic, Jacqueline has a question. She said, what's the maximum number of people you can have in a Teams meeting at one time? Is there a limit? I mean, because some agencies, let me just say OPWDD, if they wanted all hands meeting, could they do the whole agency?
It's a little bit of a tricky question because there are different levels of Teams access and Teams licensing. So there's definitely that as well. It also determines what kind of setup you have. I haven't run into, for us, a limit with it, but we're only using it for small internal things, right? So we haven't pushed up against it. I know that there are some numbers and they keep growing, so I don't want to put a number out there because they keep changing that and pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off and making it bigger. But it all depends on the licensing and what particular version of Teams you have and if you have one that allows for those kind of things. Some of these meetings will change from there's the webinar style, there's the meeting style, there's just a straight presentation style. So Teams does offer a much larger hierarchy that's above what this course is, but that's definitely something if you're interested and you're worried about it, it's something you can talk about with your IT coordinators, and they'll let
Yeah.
you know a little bit more specifically about the version. But it's I haven't run into a limit yet at this point, but I'm not using it in a gigantic capacity. When we do it on Zoom, we do have to make sure that we've upgraded our account. If we're doing a large, over 250, we have to make sure that the account is, handling that. And now we have a couple that can handle up to 500 at a time. So you just have to upgrade the account, and you should be able to have more access.
Well, so the New York State ITS has applied whatever limit they're going to apply, and we can't really control that. So
exactly. But you could find out what those limits are, right?
Right.
So you could at least have that information where that's not something I would be privy to. All right, excellent. So I love these questions, so fantastic. But now once you're in the meeting, different set of controls activated, and we've outlined them here for you on the slide. These are called the participant controls, and they appear only when you're in the meeting. Now, we're not going to go over each of these, but the important ones right now are called out in bubbles. The bubbles call out right there. You can see that we've got the text telling you what they are. So we have chat, raise hands, video, microphone, share, and leave. The chat and raise hand buttons work in the same way as in WebEx and are great tools to prevent individuals from speaking over each other and dealing with background noise. Right? Toggling the video and microphone buttons turns these on and off, and toggling means you just click it more than once, right? Mm-hmm. Clicking the share button allows you to share content such as your desktop or a specific window, right? As long as that window is open, right? If you don't have software open, it won't show you it, but if it's open, you can share it. And finally, the leave button. This is how you're going to exit the meeting, or if you are actually the host, you click leave and you'll end the meeting for everyone as well. All right, so let's look at some best practices for using meetings in Teams. Number one, be mindful, folks. Here be dragons. Beware of the Meet Now function. I mentioned this briefly during our tour, but if you click this button for a chat or a channel, you will start a meeting and call every member of that chat or channel immediately. Pause there for a second. Think about that. It's 7 a.m. and you're in your pajamas and you click that button accidentally and you're calling the entire organization with the camera on. So if that's what you wanted to do, good morning, happy Monday. But if that's not what you want to do, be really mindful of that Meet Now function, because some places in your calendar, if you click Meet Now, it'll let you start a blank meeting with just you in it. But if you click a chat, you will start a meeting with the people who are in the chat. Like a channel, you will start a meeting with everyone in the channel. Right? So you see how it gets more formal as you move your way up. Now, another thing, mute when you're not talking. This one is essential in keeping meetings short and making sure everyone can hear. There's a reason we do it for our webinars. Not for nothing, folks, this is a little personal thing. Sometimes we're at home, and if you're at home and you're eating, that's not a problem, but please make sure that you're muting if you're eating. No one wants to hear the chewers. We'll see, but hearing is really hard, right? So be careful. On the flip side of that, even if you are eating, go ahead, eat it. Just set yourself to mute, but put that video camera on. You have the webcam. The rest of your team members are using theirs. It's a great way to stay engaged. I know that when I'm training, if people have their cameras on, I can see their facial expressions, I can see the reactions, and for me, it's so much more human. It is fantastic. Here's a tip for you. If you're doing one of these video meetings where everybody's in the meeting and you all have the video, use the same background. You'll trick your brain into thinking you're all in the same place. It works. We've done this. We have this one background in Teams that gives you the appearance of you're in a great office in New York City with the skyline behind you, and we all set the background together, and after a few minutes, it feels like we're in the same place because mentally we all have the same background. And you can do the together mode and some other neat things like that, but it's just a way to help make it more fun and more human for us in this weird world, right? Now, the background blur, number 4, is background blur. That video can sometimes be distracting for other people in your meeting. So if you use a background blur, you can minimize distractions and risk of embarrassment if there's other people. If you are interested, one of my colleagues built a PVC piping for about $10 and put a sheet over it and made her own green screen. Oh. It was really, really easy, and it works perfectly. So now she can project whatever she wants, and no one can see her husband walking behind. So it's a super, super solution for her, and she was really happy to build it, and it cost literally $10 with the sheet included. Zoom in when you're screen sharing, another best practice if you can, because think folks might be on different devices. They might not always be on a computer. If you're sharing that screen, remember that everyone else is seeing a smaller version of your screen, so zoom in. And here is another tip for you, and this is right from Michael Barber's experience. If you're sharing your screen, drop your video. Yes, drop the video, because then it'll make all the video cameras, if everyone's camera is off, they'll disappear, and then they'll be able to see your Zoom screen a little bit easier. When you need to, put the camera back on, and it'll come right back, right? It's just another way to kind of be a little more organized. Lastly, the chat and the raised hand functions. The chat box in the meeting can be used to keep the background noise to a minimum, but allow others to speak as well. It's a great place to share links and resources because that chat's going to be saved along with the meeting history and can be revisited again later. The raise hand button is another great way to prevent individuals from speaking over each other. It's a great way to conduct informal polls. You know, how many people would like to order pizza for lunch, you know, and everybody raises their hand. It's a quick way to communicate. Right? So those are our 6 best practices for working in meetings. At this point, do we have any questions about meetings before we move on?
Any questions about meetings? You're welcome to click on the raise hand button or type it in chat, whatever's easiest for you. Well, I'm not seeing anything, so I think we'll move on for now.
Fantastic. All right, finally, let's talk about file sharing. Now, in addition to staying connected with teams and team members, Microsoft Teams has another great feature, which is file sharing and collaboration. Earlier, we showed you where you can find some of the files that you share through Teams. But before we go deeper into the how and when, let's talk about the benefits. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, though. What do you think are some benefits of using Teams for file sharing and collaboration? And if you're not familiar with this feature in Teams, that's okay. Think about the benefits of cloud sharing in general.
Okay, so what do you guys think? Why would people want to share documents amongst a team? Why don't you tell us in chat what your thoughts are? If your team only works within your agency, your files should be kept safely within your agency. So more than one person can make edits. Maybe it's special for the meeting. You know, you might say, we're going to be talking about this. Working on a project together, to collaborate with each other. So access to the most recent updates, right?
There we go. That's
those are great ideas. Yep.
All right, folks. So thank you again for sharing your ideas. You're all on the right track. We're absolutely there. The main benefit of sharing those files in Teams is that it makes collaboration easier, right? Instead of worrying about file versions, right? You can all look at and edit the same file at once. You no longer have to worry about that one person who always seems to have the file you want open, preventing you from opening it, right? You can have multiple people in the same file at the same time. Now, there is, however, a dark side to this level of freedom. Sometimes having someone else edit while you are in the document can be a recipe for frustration. So it's best to make expectations clear about who should be working on the document and when. And if you're worried about individual...
Oh, Michael, did we lose you there?
Making changes before you're ready. Oh, am I here?
Oh, you're dropping out a little bit, so maybe just say the last sentence or two. Can you hear me?
Sure, just fine. Is my volume okay?
Yeah, you were dropping out. Your audio was dropping out. Hopefully it wasn't just me, but okay.
Probably talking too much. That's usually my
I don't think so.
If you have multiple people in the document at the same time, make sure that you're communicating with each other so they're not deleting what you have, you know, just added, right? So be really mindful about working multiple cooks in the kitchen, as it were.
Yeah, makes sense. Yep, and your audio seems fine now.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so now that we understand the benefits, how do you share a file? There are a few ways to share files, and we passed by most of them as we were taking our tour of Teams earlier. But for now, though, we're only going to talk about 2, the chat and the channel. And in both, you can attach the file to your message simply using the paperclip button.
Just like in an Outlook. message.
You got it. Exactly like using a Wrapup message. So by using uploads, you can add your file to cloud storage. It goes into your OneDrive for chat and into SharePoint for channel. So there again, you can see kind of how they have a little bit less formal with the chat. It's going to be just stored in your OneDrive. In the channel, it will be stored in SharePoint, which all of your team will have access to, right? So you can see the storage even sets up the level of hierarchy for conversations and chats. Anytime you want to work on a file after that, you simply go back to your chat or channel and you can open that right up. So when should you use file sharing in Teams? Whenever you want to, right? In reality, file sharing and collaboration is most helpful if your team is committed to working on that shared file in the same place. So first, consider your agency or department's policies for document creation, sharing, and storage. Do they use the shared drive or SharePoint? Do you have freedom to work on your files wherever you want, right? It's a good idea to talk to your supervisor or manager about this before you dive fully into file sharing, right? Because if only a few people on the team are sharing it a certain way, it's not going to be as effective as if everyone is sharing it the same way.
Yep.
Okay? So think about those existing work habits on your team, how people are already sharing files, and then talk to them about how using Teams, it's not something to use alone, right? Teams literally is a collaboration software, and having the same expectation, the same vocabulary, just makes you be more effective. All right, here's some best practices for file sharing here. 1, know where the file lives. Depending on where you shared that file, it may be stored in SharePoint for a channel or on your personal drive or personal OneDrive for a chat. So before you share, make sure you're choosing the right place. Next, upload once. Instead of working on a file on your desktop and sharing multiple versions, share once and work there, one and done.
Yeah.
So now, when you work on the files in the cloud, sometimes you can, instead of working on the files on your desktop or sending to your teams, you can upload your file once and then work on it right in the cloud. So depending on where your files are stored, you can go back to SharePoint or OneDrive and open them up and edit them, but you can always find them in Teams.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially if some of you are working remotely that day, some of you are in the office, things like that might help.
All right, do we have any questions about file sharing and collaboration before we move on?
Any questions about sharing files in Teams? You can type it in chat, you can click on the raise hand button. I'm not seeing anything, so I think we will move on.
Excellent. We've covered a lot of ground today, folks, so let's recap. We started out with our mini tour of Microsoft Teams to give you an idea of the basic features. Right? Then we walked through how to use the chat messages and channel postings, and then how to schedule and participate in a meeting. Finally, we took a closer look at how to share and collaborate along files. And along the way, we gave you some best practices for using each feature. Now, remember, we gave you several useful handouts today, so please refer to them after this webinar has ended. So, curious, based on everything we talked about today, will you use Teams after today?
Okay, go ahead and click on the raise hand button if you think you might use it, or sure, type it in chat if you like. Yeah, I'm getting, quite a few. Quite a few yeses, I should say.
Yes.
And Ed Hines says, I hope so. And to answer that earlier question, New York State employees should have access to both to Teams. You just may never have used it. It's possible you need to talk to your IT folks if it's not installed, but I'm going to assume that everyone should have access to that. Again, you may need to ask, but I think it's already there. You just, like me, maybe haven't started using it much yet. So, any last questions? Oh, before we do that, hey, you know what? I would like to know one thing that you learned today that you think you could apply after today's webinar. Would you type that in the chat box? What's one thing you heard today that you were like, yeah, that makes sense to me? And any takeaways from today? How to start a chat, that you could share files, yeah, great. What else did you guys have as takeaways? Using channels more, Teresa said. Beware of me
Yes,
now.
there we go. That's what we were hoping.
Yeah, channels chat not the same. How to collaborate on a project
Oh, this
conveniently.
is great. Look at this.
The blur background, yeah, there's that idea also, that nice tip about using the sheet in the PVC, difference between chat and channel.
Amazing.
Yep, wonderful. And, you know, I'm glad that you're sharing those ideas with me. I appreciate it. So thank you for sharing your thoughts throughout the day. That is for sure. Me now. Yeah. And
I'd just like to say thank you very quickly before we turn this over to Eileen. I really appreciate your time, your energy, your enthusiasm, and your participation has been wonderful. Thank you all very much for this and for all of the work that you do as well.